All right, time to begin this evening. Dan, will you stand and lead us in a prayer before we get started?
Lord and Father, thank you so much for the thing you've given us, and thank you for your word to guide us, Lord. Without it, we would be lost. Thank you for loving us enough to send your Son and send others as messengers that we might know what your will is for us. Thank you for this book we're studying tonight. Help us to give attention to what our brother prepared for us, the word to deliver. How to be a better husband, a better wife, or how to be a better spouse in the future, and look for that one in the future. Help us take seriously the responsibilities and the joys of that relationship. Please be with Steve as he presents this to us. He will do so effectively. We'll all be blessed by his effort. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Thanks, Dan. Here's our class outline. And Eric did the intro and I did the last class. And if you notice, tonight's class is going to be about marriage and fulfillment. And one thing that I didn't forecast would happen is that my teaching partner would go all the way to the Middle East to get out of teaching this class. And it would be me presenting. We did it this way in the small class, but I was thinking about that this afternoon. I thought, how did I get stuck with this class? Tonight we're going to talk about marriage and fulfillment. Marriage and fulfillment. We could have called this class a lot of things. We're going to talk about in a marriage meeting each other's needs, and those needs come in lots of different forms. Physical needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs. So that's what this class will be about. So we're going in order, a logical order. And last week we talked about finding a mate. Now that you found a mate, God put us together to meet each other's needs. When Emily and I got married, she gave me an assignment, and it was a book called His Needs, Her Needs. And it was a book all about meeting each other's needs in a marriage. And it was actually really good if you want to look it up. Tonight, this is an easy class as far as the verse to go to in Song of Solomon. Sometimes these classes are like, we're talking about apples, raisins, and foxes and trying to make application to a basic concept. Not for this class. This class, 3 times in the book, is the statement made like this. The last one's a little bit different, but if you'll open your Bibles, or you can read on the screen, Song of Solomon chapter 2, verse 7, you'll see this language. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. What does that phrase mean? Anybody studied it or have an idea? Bubba? Yeah, excellent. Bubba said one interpretation of this verse is that you don't stir up what God created to be a lawful part of marriage before it's lawful to do so. You're not meeting each other's physical needs until you're married is one interpretation. Anybody else? There's a couple ways that commentators and writers look at this, and a big one is that you don't stir up things that don't need to be stirred up before their time. Another one is, some say, and they say that the book follows this outline, is that, and it fits in with what Bubba said, but you let love be something that's natural. You don't force things. You don't agitate it. You don't, what are some of the words that they say? The gazelles are timid and shy, and you don't poke at it. You let it happen naturally, in its time, in the way that God created it. So how that would apply to the marriages, you'll see 3 descriptions. She makes a description early on in chapter 2, verse 7, not married yet. The wedding hasn't happened. She has a dream before the wedding, and you see the same language pop up. And then at the end, right before you read about love being as fierce as death, that strong language in chapter 8, verse 6, she says it again. You don't stir up love until it pleases. And one of the interpretations is all parts of marriage, love is something that's going to develop. And you're going to need that naturally developed love to handle all the situations of marriage. So you don't stir it up and push love before it's too early, before you get married. But when you get married, things are going to happen and you're going to mature over time together. So then, when you face hardship, you've developed that relationship and that love that's going to deal with that hardship. When someone is tempted to commit adultery, you've developed that love, and that's going to help fight against with God's help and defeating the devil. That's what's going to happen there. The idea, what a blessed thing is pure and natural affection. Let love not be forced or unnatural, is the idea. What are some ways we can awaken love before it's time? What are some ways that the world awakens love before it's time? In movies, okay. What else? Dan?
One of the truths about this temptation is it starts in the mind. So we can let our mind go places where our mind shouldn't go. And that's going to facilitate action or make it more likely that then we take action. And it really starts with controlling our mind and what we think about.
Right. Absolutely. That's good. Dan talked about you have to control your mind. Glenn?
The idea of the society's customs and the things that society teaches and encourages and doesn't discourage. But ultimately, you get to a point where somebody says, if you love me, you do this. And the answer to that is, if you love me, you ask me.
How long do worldly relationships wait before they sleep together, if you had to guess? 1 month, 1 year, 2 months? It's probably really short. People that I've talked to don't wait long at all. Second date, third date, they awaken love as fast as you possibly can. And you read studies and statistics, it's pretty scary what people do. They don't follow the biblical pattern. And so you stir up love way too soon. Matt?
Another way we can take a look at this is how the world, being in conjunction with things with regards to how the world operates. It's the lust of the flesh. It's that lust that we have in form that we don't control. Today, the culture is, starting back in the 60s, reason of love, people being able to do whatever they want to do, just because they can do it. And that's just giving in to that physical lust that they're after. That's how actually, the Greek term is used too. And people, the way they dress, the way they propose, that's exactly what we see.
Some things take time. God's given us laws that we follow, and that we need to follow that, and it's going to take more time than what people want. When I was in high school, people don't really do, I don't know if schools do dances anymore or anybody dances, but my parents didn't let me go to dances. And I was like, Mom, why can't I go to the dance? And her basic answer was, because I don't want you to stir or awaken love before it's time. The idea was, you're going to go and you're going to dance, and you're going to be physically attracted, and that's going to lead down a path you don't need to lead it down, so you're not going to the dance. And I don't think any kids dance today, so it's probably a moot point today. But back then, that was a big deal, and I wasn't allowed to go. One time, Emily's coming late, so we'll tell the story before she gets here. When I was 13, I had my first girlfriend. For transparency, I've only had 2 girlfriends, a young girl, when I was 13, and then Emily. That's it, so I don't have a lot of experience. But when I was 13, 13, my cousin and I, we went to church together, and this girl who was my first girlfriend, she went to the church that I did, and our parents let us go to the bowling alley alone. And it was me and my cousin who's a guy, the girl, my first girlfriend, and her friend. And I thought, wow, they're going to let us go to the bowling alone. And so we pull up to the bowling alley, and there's not a lot of bowling alleys here, but in Michigan it seems like there's one on every block. So bowling's a bigger deal there than it is here. So we get into the bowling alley, and my aunt pauses, and she said, now, she talks to me and my cousin. She said, you better not take those girls into the bathroom and have sex with them. And I'm like, well, I'm 13. We just want to bowl and listen to the music. She said, I'm not going to leave you here to awaken or stir up love until it pleases. And I thought, you have nothing to worry about. Because that is not, I remember it blowing my mind. She was so worried about giving us that freedom at a bowling alley that we were going to misuse it. As 13, people don't talk that way anymore, but back then she must have thought we were really mature. But I remember being so taken back by that. I went, whoa. But the idea was you be careful with the situation so you don't stir or awaken love before it pleases. What happens when we don't listen, heed that? What happens to couples now who jump into bed right away together? Or who don't let love mature? What's the end game of it?
Marriage over and over again, children without fathers. In some cases, mothers leave their children, and no sense of parental guidance.
Yeah. It wrecks families, wrecks relationships, causes all kinds of problems over and over and over again. There isn't anything good that comes out of violating God's laws and stirring up love before it pleases. I missed a hand. Somebody had a... Oh, go ahead, Larry. So we're talking about rushing love and not allowing physical fulfillment or rushing it before it's time when you get married. But look at Song of Solomon chapter 6, verses 2 through 3, because the writer paints this in a beautiful picture. Sometimes we're afraid to talk about marriage and fulfillment, marriage and sex, but it's a beautiful thing that God created inside the marriage relationship. So in chapter 6, they're married, and it says, my beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to graze in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies. Inside the marriage relationship, the way that a married couple takes care of each other is beautiful. God designed it to be that way. I wrote that this is the way God designed it. I love Hebrews chapter 12. You'll think this is a stretch, but it says in verse 2, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. That founder word in other translations says the author. This is where we get our authority, is from Jesus. He authored marriage and created it. And so we look to him who authored it for our guidance. It's interesting, it says the perfecter of our faith. That word faith means to trust. If we trust in God and trust in what he designed and authored, look at how much better the world would be if we followed that and left fulfillment inside the marriage. That verse applies to all kinds of things, but God authored everything that we have and that he's given us, in the institution of marriage is included in that. And he's asked us to trust his ways. I talk to people all the time, they say cohabitation is the right way to do it. That's where success comes from. Live together, you test out your mate, and then you'll know whether you're compatible. But that's not how God designed it, even though the world has a different way of saying it. So we need to be careful that we always trust in him and be an example. And remember, you guys are probably thinking, well, we know this, Steve. We're following what he says. We need to make sure we let that light shine so others see it. The world would be a far better place if they relied and looked to Jesus as the author and said, I'm going to do what he says. He's the one who designed it. In Matthew chapter 19, verse 5, the design was that a man would leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they would become one flesh. And there is an idea of one flesh that is brought together, and in the sexual relationship is definitely a part of that. You leave your father and mother, you become one flesh. When it doesn't go that route, you end up in 1 Corinthians 16. So outside of marriage, it's a sin. Flee sexual immorality. Those of us that have young kids, they need to remember this verse. This is one of the first verses that I can remember, not the whole verse, but the beginning, flee sexual immorality. We need to be careful of that, because that's what it ends up being, and the world doesn't call it that. They call it cohabitation. They call it living together. They call it trying the partner. There was an article today, I saw some lady, and she was sharing what she learned from having 300 partners in 1 year. That's the kind of stories and the things that you see, that you read about. It's unbelievable, and where all of us that are parents are scared that our kids are going to find somebody that is following God's laws, but more and more of them are not. So it's a difficult thing. Someone had a hand up. Glenn?
Society, and what you just stated, it makes it be obvious. They're proud. And all of the times that they're together with different people and they don't find the right partner is just another life that's broken, or more damage that's done, and more, the society just looks at that and says, oh yeah, that's wonderful, and then they go off into male, male, female, female, and on like that. They're all proud of that. All proud.
People are proud about making wrong decisions, following a wrong path. Anybody else I missed? In 1 Corinthians 7, verse 2, so it is when we think about sexual needs, that's something that's natural, that God created us to have that. And here's the fulfillment of it. Because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman should have her own husband. That's where that's going to get satisfied in the marriage relationship. Now, some people will rush marriage because they don't want to wait. They get tired of waiting, and they want to fulfill this, so they get married. But that's the plan, is that if you're going to have that kind of temptation, it can be solved inside of marriage. In fact, in verse 9 of 1 Corinthians 7, if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So we see this, the sexual fulfillment inside of marriage. I told the class in the back when I taught this, one of the worries that I have is in Bible times, in old times, how long do people wait till they got married? When did they get married? And how has it changed to today? Yeah, they married very young. So they didn't have to control themselves very long. In 2023, our kids have to go a long stretch without, with behaving and not committing sexual immorality. They have to go a long time. They graduate with a degree, or they hit puberty at 12, 13. That natural thing happens inside. They're not getting married till they're 22, 24. A lot of people aren't getting married till their 30s. That's a long stretch to behave. So I worry about that with our kids. We need to be praying that our kids have strength to overcome sexual immorality. In 2 Peter, when he talks about add your faith, virtue to virtue, knowledge, after self-control, the next word is perseverance. And I think it's not by accident that perseverance followed self-control. What our kids have to do is persevere for years in the culture that we live in. And so I worry about that. It's a long time to go, and that's the world we live in. However, I thought about this today. In Hebrews chapter 4, turn over there. I don't have a slide for this. We talked about Jesus being the author and finisher of our faith. Look at verse 14. It says, since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Jesus was tempted in all points, all sin. The same sin that we deal with, the same sin that we're praying that our kids can overcome. He had to overcome, and he did it. And we need to look to Jesus and be motivated by that to do better with that. He was tempted, he understands, and he helps. You see all of that in these verses. We need to be praying for help. praying that we can get through it. And it doesn't just apply to our kids. If you might be a kid or a younger person in the audience, this applies to you. It applies to us that are older. And then lastly, it doesn't just happen before marriage and in the build up to marriage, but when you're married, there's still application for us that we have to avoid sexual sin. It says, "Let marriage be held in honor among all. Let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous." We need to be careful. I'll never forget Bubba's sermon years ago on we need to be careful with each other. And he said, if there's a woman, he was talking to, I think you were talking to the men, if there's a woman that gives you butterflies inside and it's not your wife, you need to stay away from them. And so what he was saying was, don't go and flirt with that sin and stir something up. You need to stay away from it. You need to cut it off before it gets there. We used to have an older lady here, and I'd go and visit her, and she would talk about sin, and she'd say, "Steve, do you know how you keep sin from your life?" She said, "When the devil pops up, you cut his head off." And it was so interesting. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty straightforward. Sometimes you have to cut it off, the sin, before it awakens. And if somebody makes you nervous or somebody's flirting with you, you need to take some measures and do the right thing. That can happen inside this building as easy as it can happen outside. In fact, I said this before, and everybody gets nervous and acts weird around me when I say it, but we're more comfortable with each other. And that comfort that we have, because we're both Christians, sometimes allows guards to go down. And that's how you end up with Christians committing adultery together. They know each other, they're familiar. Guess who cheats? You cheat with somebody you know. You cheat with somebody that's close. The movies make it sound like you cheat with George Clooney, who you just happen to run into at the coffee shop. That's not how most affairs happen. They happen with somebody you know. So you got to be really careful. Hold the marriage bed with the highest honor. God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. That's real scary. The Bible's full of God's judgment and warning. This is one of those. So if you find yourself in that situation, you need to take care of that quickly. Matt?
Mark Brewer was here, taught us that, we can be married. He made reference to the book Hedges, especially men, with men. Anything you do, put up a defense before you do it. If you think about what happened during the European time, Hedges was a defense mechanism because people would get bogged down. And so they knew exactly beforehand. The problem is, like you said, you get comfortable, think that you're stronger than you realize, and before you know it, it just takes over. And that's the challenge, is that when you put up hedges, you've already pre-planned those activities because you know what the weak spots are. You put those hedges up to help defend. And a lot of that is predetermined in your mind. And that's what we've got to continuously do.
Yeah, excellent. And bringing what Dan said, starts in the mind. So you need to get your mind under control. You need to get your actions under control. You hear about people that get caught in adultery, and I've told this to Emily before. What is the anatomy of, not a person's anatomy, what is the anatomy of an affair? Where in the world does it start? I couldn't even make it to the coffee house with somebody. Emily'd see it on Life 360, and I'd be in big trouble. So I don't get what in the world happens. I wouldn't even make it to Panera Bread or the coffee house, and I'd be caught. So I don't get but it happens. It happens. We need to be really careful, and we need to abide by that. Yes?
Respect and that has to be learned from parents. Having the highest respect for the opposite sex. To the extent that it keeps you from wanting to defile someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Garrett said we need to have respect for the opposite sex. Absolutely. As a young person, when Emily and I were dating, I thought about that all the time. I'm supposed to care about her soul, but the physical's telling me something different, and there's the battle that you have to do what's right. I've told the story a bunch of times. When we were dating, we pulled up to her house, and our parents had a rule: you weren't allowed in an empty house together. So we pulled up in front of the house, and I let the physical win, and I told Emily, I said, well, let's go in. It's no big deal. We have all kinds of self-control. And she said, we're not going to go in. And I said, well, I have to go to the bathroom. I started coming up with all these excuses. And she stood strong and helped me in that. And that was an example, we go back to last week's class, of this is a woman that has our best interest at heart and was helping in that way. And I really appreciated that. And that's what you need that's what you're going to have as you have that fulfillment together. Somebody had a hand up I missed. Glenn?
Whoso looks on a woman whose husband's heart is already committed to know. We have to start that way ahead of letting that get hold of us. Another thing in the passage that you talk about the marriage bed, you have to be careful that you're not pressing somebody to do something that they do back.
Let me go forward. I skipped over. Oh, here it is. So when we think about why we don't want to awaken love before it's time, I want to talk about something real quick of Solomon. If Solomon be the author of Song of Solomon, which many think that he was, he awakened love and made some big mistakes with this. Just as a quick reminder, he had 700 wives, 300 concubines, and all of that turned his heart away from God and turned the wisest man to ever live away from God. So we can get caught up in sin, and it can quickly turn our hearts away from God. We need to remember that. There's a lot of other things, fulfillment. We've spent most of the time talking about physical fulfillment, and that is within the marriage. But there are a lot of other reasons that God put us together. Remember, Adam needed a helper, and God brought him Eve. It wasn't just to meet his sexual needs. It was to meet. We meet more than that when we're in our marriage. Look at Song of Solomon 2 verse 3 says, like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my dearest compared to other men. I love to sit in its shadow, and its fruit is sweet to my taste. You see, she calls him like an apple tree, my dearest, is compared to the other men. He's strong. He takes care of me. Think about protection and provision. Catch the foxes in chapter 2, the little foxes, before they ruin our vineyard. He's working and helping and taking care of her. God put us together to help each other. This is a great example. There are protection and provisions that we provide that also happen within the marriage. And I'll put this slide in here to remember, I did the disclaimer last week. We get uncomfortable with these subjects sometimes, but this is part of our walk as Christians. God designed marriage, and you executing your marriage as best you can is part of your service to God. To make your marriage the best it can, to follow the scriptures as part of your walk. So don't think that it's not. Coming to church is an important part of our walk. Bible study is an important part of our walk, but so is handling our marriage in a godly manner that follows the scriptures. Remember the application. Second verse on here too, another principle. We don't think about this either. Well, when I'm working and taking care of my family, I'm also following God's guidance. And you say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't count. You're not in a church building. You're not in worship. God asked us to take care of our families and to care for members of our whole household. That's part of your Christian walk. Even though it doesn't fit, we talked about last time, doesn't fit in Bible study, evangelism, prayer, and public worship. It's part of our walk. So we need to remember that and think about that and be spiritually motivated to do the best job we can. That's part of what we are doing as Christians. Next, we talked about provisions, protection. The next is emotional. Chapter 5, verse 16, his mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. I like how it put, he's my friend. Bubba also preached a sermon that we need to be careful that we don't look at our spouses as just a piece of meat, that she's just there for my physical enjoyment. There's an emotional aspect of marriage as well. And we need to consider that as well and not have one-sided marriage and appreciate all the wonderful things about our spouse. Proverbs 18:22, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. You find a wife, you find a good thing. And that emotional support and all of the ways that you fulfill each other is something that's going to be great. I love this verse in Deuteronomy 24. When a man is newly married, he shall not go out with the army or be liable for any public duty. He shall be free at home 1 year to be happy with his wife whom he has taken. How neat is that? To take that time to spend to be together. That's really, really neat. When I graduated, I went to Purdue in Indiana, and 2 weeks after I got married, or 2 weeks after I graduated from Purdue, Emily and I got married. We immediately went on a honeymoon, and then we drove from Indiana down to Texas. We did a lot in a month's time. And I worked really hard to get job offers, and one of the job offers I got was a consulting job in Chicago, working in IT implementation. I had a MIS minor, and it was going to be a 100% on-the-road job. And I remember telling my parents, and it was good money, a lot more money than what NASA offered. NASA's government job, you're not going to start like you might in a fully traveling consulting type job. And I was like $20,000 difference. And Emily didn't work the first year, so I told her about this job offer, and we had dollar signs in our eyes. We were spending the money. We thought we'd hit it big. We were rich. So I tell my parents, I said, what do you think? They said, that's a terrible idea. And I said, it's $20,000 more than NASA. And they said, no, that's a terrible idea. I said, why is it a bad idea? They said, because you're getting married, and immediately after you get married, you're going to be gone all week, every week. How are you going to establish your marriage? How are you going to get established in a church? What are you going to do when the temptations start kicking in? They threw the kitchen sink at that. And I remember going back to Emily and saying, you know all that stuff we were going to buy? We got to rewind that. We're going to Houston for $20,000 less money. And it was the right decision to do that, and it was great advice. But they wanted us to establish that marriage, that we were going to lean on each other and grow together. It was some of the best advice that I got. And this verse makes me think that you're going to be free to be happy with your wife. Not on the road, not gone all the time. That God put us together, and that's something that you're going to start building from the get-go. The last fulfillment that I had was spiritual, and we talked about this verse last week real quick, but two are better than one. The concept of two are better than one, because your spouse is going to help you spiritually. We forget that. We hear sermons about evangelism and about being a good example, and you kind of skip right over your spouse. You start thinking about, well, I'm packing up, I'm going to Zimbabwe from village to village, but you hadn't talked to your wife about her spirituality or your kids. So don't overlook those that are next to you. God put us together to help each other spiritually. Something really big to keep in mind. So what are the other benefits that you have of God putting you together that we haven't talked about yet? What have you experienced that you've been fulfilled from your spouse since you've been married? We have a lot of experience in the room. Anybody want to share? Glenn?
At first, as you grow together, you get stronger, and you're physically more mature, emotionally more mature, and everything else. But as you pass that stage of middle age maturity, you need each other more and more. You need to listen to each other. You need to reassess what your needs are and make sure that you're taking care of her in the way you need to be taken care of. Because in some cases, I just need her to drive with me so she tells me what car not to get. There are all kinds of things like that. You help each other. You find ways to help each other in ways that you didn't anticipate when you were young.
Yeah, that's a great comment. You have to keep up with what are our needs, and those needs are going to change over time. Yes, excellent. Mark?
When you get married and you're anticipating having a family, and when you do have a family, it's not what you anticipated. That journey with your kids from infancy to all of that stuff, in our house it was 2 against 3, but Amy and I, that was something to experience.
That's a great comment. That's a great comment. It gets lost a little bit and you have to work to make sure. I've talked to people that grew apart, and then the kids left empty nester, and then they have to get to know each other again. So yeah, it needs to be cared and feeded all along the way. Victor? Yes. Yes, yeah. Excellent, excellent comment. That backbone that you have there, that's one of the ways that God designed it to be like that. And it's neat when it works. I think about that a lot. Thanks, Victor. Matt?
In line with what Victor was saying, I remember when I used to travel the world, and I used to go to different places, and people would say, "Wasn't that fantastic?" To go by myself. Because he was working, my wife wasn't there, we would come back, and then I went down and do it myself thoroughly. And it's a subtle thing. It's nothing really extravagant. It's the journey that you have. The longer the journey, the more you realize the benefits. And it's the subtle benefits that build up when you have it. And it's wonderful to see it, even an older couple, man, I've been married for years. When you see people living for 60, 65, so forth, you can tell that they can read each other very well. And that is a benefit as well. And when you're down, you know without even saying a word.
Since 2001, and one of the things my coworkers say all the time when they get to know me is they always say this: "I wish I had an Emily." Going to what Victor said, because they know the support that she gives me and the benefit of having a strong marriage. People even start to see that, and you have an influence on them, and they see marriage working the way that God designed it. And guess what? They're like, that's attractive. I want something like that. And so it's kind of a neat thing. It's a way that you can be a good example and give glory to God through your strong marriages, and people will see that. Glenn?
I tend to think of their responsibility to use their wife emotions as kind of a one-way thing. And when I was in the military, things that I was doing really hurt me a lot. If I hadn't had her, I probably wouldn't be where I am. The jobs that I've had, some were very physical, some were very hazardous. Always having somebody who would just kind of settle things down made me very happy.
Excellent. Real quick, we're almost done. I looked this up. Marriage is good. Physical fulfillment, good for your heart, good for stress, reduces pain. Physical, intellectual, emotional, psychological, social are all the ways and the benefits that you get from being married. Marriage rates are down across the world, and I want to just leave you with this as a little bit of a scary statistic, because the devil is going to do what he can to mess up marriages, and he's going to do what he can to stop people from getting married. And one of the things that has just out of control in our world is the pornography industry, something we need to be cognizant of and always don't underestimate the power that the devil's going to use to ruin things with this device in particular. It's a $13 billion industry in the U.S. 35% of all downloads have to do with pornography. 25% of all search engine searches. So you go in your computer and you type in weather.com to see what's going to go on with the weather. 25% of what people are typing in is not that. 40 million Americans regularly visit these sites, and look at this statistic: 70% of men 18 to 24. So there's some real scary statistics. It's a tool the devil uses. When we were kids, you had to find magazines. Now it travels in your pocket and your phone. And you can sit in the church pew while Bubba's preaching and do all of this stuff with no problem, as long as you have a mobile data connection. or Wi-Fi. So we need to be really, really careful. It follows us around and it's everywhere. So we talk about being careful with each other, be careful with electronics. It's one of the biggest things that has grown over the years. And there's nothing new under the sun. People had sexual immorality problems as far to the beginning of time. It's just extremely accessible. And the devil's using it, and he's having a whole lot of success with it. So let's be careful. He's going to attack us with the same. Be careful when we think about that. Fulfillment, God gave us our wives for fulfillment inside the marriage when it comes to the sexual fulfillment and emotional fulfillment. All those things need to happen inside of marriage. Let's make sure we have strong marriages. Let's make sure we're meeting our spouse's needs. All right, that's it. Thank you all for your comments and time.
Sure is good. It's good to be here. It's good to be with you. While a few are still finding their seats, I encourage you to just take a minute and just look around. Make eye contact with a few others that are here. I know it feels weird. Go ahead. Just think about how wonderful a blessing it is to be able to be together with such people and worship God together. And know we have a common mission and a common goal and a common love that matters. We're going to sing a couple of songs before Brother brings us the invitation. And we kind of have a theme. It's just two of my favorites. So that's what I picked out. So, How Deep the Father's Love. We'll sing that song first. I think both of these are just on the screen. How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make the wretched treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the Lamb upon the cross, my sin upon His shoulders, a shame that hear my longing voice call out among the stars. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is song is a shield about me. It's a very simple, repetitive song. I love that because it really makes it easy. Just think about what we're singing. Shield about me.
My dad grew up without a father. My grandfather abandoned his family, his wife and little daughter and two twin boys when my dad was very little. And so as the oldest son, he became the man of the house. And as a result, anything he did, he was self-taught, and he could fix anything, especially cars. And so now, even though this February was the 10th anniversary of his passing, he's always the first one I think of when I've got a problem with one of mine. And the first thought is, well, Dad would know what to do. And so as a result, I have to go to YouTube videos. And I have to try to find somebody else who's got the same make and model or is having the same issue I'm having, and I usually find them. And in finding these videos, I found two comforts. Number one, I'm not alone. Somebody else not only has this same vehicle, but they're having the same issue I'm having. It's not just me. It's not just the one I bought. There are others who are just like me, and that's comforting. And secondly, I can do this. There's hope. Nobody's going to post a video and say, well, I couldn't figure it out, but I thought you'd want to watch all the ways I failed at trying to fix this. No, they've been successful. And here are the steps, and even sometimes they'll put in the comment section, here are the links if you want to go buy the part, and you can do this. In 1 Peter chapter 5, we have that famous verse we all know, be sober, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. But as is often the case with familiar verses like that, they tend to overshadow the one that comes after them. And that's the one I want you to be mindful of tonight. So after the great warning, here's our adversary. He's a roaring lion. He's prowling around, seeking someone to devour. Look at 1 Peter 5 and verse 9. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brothers throughout the world. The word experienced can also be translated accomplished or completed. While the devil tries to isolate us, we can be encouraged. There are others who are going through these same sufferings as you. And so from these YouTube videos, I want you to remember, number one, you're not alone. And number two, you can do this. These same things are being experienced by others throughout the world. And not only that, they're being successful. They're accomplishing them. Because after you have suffered a little while, Peter said, the God of all grace, who has called you to the eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. To him be the dominion forever and ever. Let's remember we have the help of our great Father who will never leave us. And we have the strength of one another to encourage and to help us through. You're not alone. You can do this. It may be that you owe some duty to God tonight, and you're facing life without Him. He's calling you to come to Him, to come and confess your faith and be baptized, to become His disciple and His child. Or if you need the prayers and encouragement of your spiritual family because you feel alone and you don't know if you can go one more day, let us help you. Make it known right now while we stand up and while we sing. Well, it's wonderful that we can be together tonight and to be reminded of those of our family here at Southside who are in need and whom we can pray for and assist and encourage. And we've had quite a lot that has happened since the Lord's Day. And so to our visitors, please allow us just a moment to rehearse these for our members before Neil Ashworth comes to lead our dismissal prayer. Bertha Sizer was just as we were in services tonight in a procedure at Bayshore to address one of the kidney stones that put her in the hospital. And so remember her as you pray that all will go well with this procedure. There was a Knitworks that was sent out to the ladies about a special need for Bertha's daughter, Linda. She's 54 years old but has Down syndrome, and she has a caretaker during the day, but there is a need for ladies to stay the night with her, and Callie Lawrence has been doing that but needs some help and assistance. And so if you could please see Callie or contact Callie. Obviously she's with Linda at this hour, but that would be a great help to Callie and then the family of Bertha Sizer. Cindy Laritzen is doing better after her trip to the ER, and she was up here at the building this week helping with the class materials. We're glad for that. Larry McCann is here, and of course Alice had surgery yesterday, hip replacement surgery, and was able to go home the same day. So we're thankful for her recovery and pray it will continue. Steve Martin will have surgery on Friday at Bayshore to reattach his quad muscle, and his rehab will be such that he'll have to keep the legs straight for 6 weeks. And so remember Steve and Renee. This is the same procedure that Seth had on both legs. So remember Steve. I spoke with Debbie Fairchild, and she had her cataract surgery on Monday and already went back for the follow-up and received a good report. So we're thankful for that. Avonlea Ellis, Mark told me, is suffering from a double ear infection and is on antibiotics. And so remember her and her family that she will improve. And then we learned that the great nephew of Brian and Andrea Broussard, Jake Adams, he's just 1 month old. He was born premature, and he was tested for RSV and had to be life-flighted to Texas Children's. So our prayers are solicited for him and his family. Remember Veronica Davila, as if they didn't have enough going on. Her grandmother, who had been suffering from dementia, passed away. And so we want to be mindful of her family and their sorrow at this time. And then Matt Bassford, we've been announcing about him, a preacher you probably never did have the privilege of hearing, but you've sung his words in our songs like Exalted, Be Strong and Courageous, and recently A Foretaste of Your Rest, and Even Song. He passed away after a battle with ALS, and funeral arrangements have been made at the Klein Funeral Home, a visitation 4 to 8 on Friday, and then a service Saturday at the Kleinwood Building at 2 p.m. So continue to pray for him and his family and all the brethren. Remember that this coming Lord's Day, Lord willing, is a 5th Sunday of the month, and so we will have a sermon in the morning that's focused on the Lord's Supper, with communion served after the sermon. And then Sunday evening service will be devoted to song worship. And then 1 week from tonight, Lord willing, the first Wednesday of November, Alan Grace will be our first Wednesday speaker. We look forward to hearing Alan. Stanley tells me that the November assignments for the worship services are available in the foyer. Men, if you'd please check those so you can be ready to serve at your appointed time. Anything else tonight before we're dismissed? We'll ask you to stand then as Neil comes to lead our prayer, and we'll look forward to being together on the Lord's Day again.
Let us pray. Lord our Father, thank you for this safe place to come together as your family and learn more about you. Thank you for our preacher, Bubba. All the lessons he gives us, let us all take something of the wisdom he imparts and take it and apply it in our daily lives. Thank you for our teachers that teach our children, teach us. Let us apply their lessons and let them continue to do what they do as best they can for all of us. Lord our Father, touch the ones that are healing, touch the ones that are sick. Touch the ones that are in pain or feeling or hurt due to loss. Bring them back to us, secure them, help them through their troublesome times. Thank you for this midweek reminder that we can all come together and be fresh for tomorrow and the next day. Help us guard our hearts so that when we go out, we're prepared for anything the devil might throw at us. Help us be strong and help us guide others back to you. Lord, most important of all, thank you for the Son, your Son, the sacrifice he made for each and every one of us, so that one day we can come home and be with you. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.